Oh, okay. So this is some deep, deep stuff. Engineers, I had just done the custom opto review, and the next day they dropped the Virtual Mix Rack 3.0 with mind-boggling new features and optimizations. My journey with the Slate Virtual Mix Rack actually began by getting a stupid deal on their RC Tube channel saturation and crosstalk plugins, which claim to give you channel crosstalk plus the classic saturation of mixing consoles. The free version had just the RC Tube, which was an emulation of two old 1950s RCA broadcast mixing consoles. And this was a thing at the time. Everyone there, 2010, 2012, was trying to figure out how to get some analog mix console saturation, crosstalk, signature tone going in your in-the-box mixes. When I tried out RC Tube, it was the first time in my life that I heard some of that similar tone that I used to get back on the big Mitsubishi desk I used to use, and I immediately bought it. Fast forward a couple years and they kill this plugin, and now you have to use their Virtual Mix Rack. I was mad at first, but I'm mad no longer. We're going to go back to me from the custom opto video to introduce the Mix Rack, and then we'll get into the new features in 3.0. The Virtual Mix Rack is a container into which you can load all sorts of Slate digital plugins. Some are available both as standalone plugins, and some are individually available only in the Virtual Mix Rack. One of the things I really love about VMR is that it builds its own little buffer in your insert chain. It loads with no latency, and it will load a bunch of plugins, a shocking amount of plugins with zero latency. I've even gotten cheeky and loaded in and messed around with plugins in a track while someone is recording. Don't believe me? Look here, you can see zero latency. Adding a Waves simple plugin. Latency. Adding more plugins. Still zero latency. Now pressing record.
And one day she finds a way for you to.
And adding plugins.
Dislocates.
And there are no skips, no pops. So the VMR is a real working engineer's kind of setup.
Back to you.
Thank you, Jay. And now let's get into the new features in Mix Rack 3.0. First off, they put in this sexy preset browser.
Streaming of a better world. It's calling on you today. In the summertime, like a bummer end, take a knife in the back from a bitter friend. She drags you down, laughs as you let go. Dreaming of a better world.
My only negative reaction to this is it's too big. It's bigger than the Mix Rack when you load it, and I've got to move the Mix Rack whenever I load presets from it.
Calling on you today in the summer.
Oh, that one's got really good attack, a little bit thin. Ooh, there we go. Getting a little more Bob Rock bottom on that.
On you today in a bed of blinding grace. She draws you in, he slips away.
And these aren't just the normie usual presets. And some of these presets are really inventive, really interesting signal chains. Take this one that purposefully processes your drums through the listen bus on the gate. Just imagine the kind of shredding and crushing parallel drum compression channel you can get going with this one. Virtual Mix Rack 3 introduces macros. This allows you to connect the functions of any controls in any of the modules, which can make for an endless possibility of linked controls, easy mixing.
This slow cadence really relates back to you. When at night her pains have passed right through.
So my first thought was, can we do things like Reaper does, where we can inversely correlate two controls? Say, the compressor's output and the output of a trim plugin, so that when I increase the output of one plugin, I can decrease the output of another. Spoiler, you can.
And one day she finds a way for you to. This slow cadence really relates back to you. When at night her pains have passed right through.
You just toy with these little envelopes until you get the behavior that you want, and you can get really micro. There are envelope curves you can choose from to get logarithmic behaviors if required. Controls can be temporarily disengaged from any macro by activating them on their own.
Today, in a better time, in a better place, a flash of light and blinding grace. She draws you in, slips away.
And the dream is real. I've inversely linked the opto output to the trim output, so turning down one turns up the other. If you're loving seeing these in-depth breakdowns, then consider liking and subscribing. I'm doing all 130 plugins in this series. It's going to be huge and epic. If you'd like to get early news on pro audio deals and innovations, join my Patreon, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notified when new videos come out. Okay, getting back to macros, let's take a look at how this deep macro functionality can work when you've tied it into all of the essential parameters that you want locked together. Let's look at some of these presets.
In a better time, in a better place, a flash of light and blinding grace. She draws you in, slips away. Face and spinning wild in outer space. She's calling on you today. In a better time, in a better place, a flash of light and blinding grace. She draws you in, slips away. She's a pretty lad, she's a pretty face and spinning wild in outer space. She's calling on you today. in a better time, in a better place. Flash of
You can
light.
quickly use this to have, things like scoop EQs set up for your bass, coordinate input gain with output gain. Possibilities are endless.
She's calling on you today, in a better time, in a better place. Flash.
And yes, this is a big one. You get side chaining into each module via your DAW's sidechain. So here, let's do the classic of getting the kick drum to duck the bass guitar. I've set up the kick as an input on Cubase's sidechain into this module. Then I activate the external sidechain on the custom opto, and you can see the kick is now the trigger.
Better time, in a better place. Flash of light and blinding grace. She drives.
And this one's simple but way overdue and gladly accepted. Gain control on each module.
Away. She's a pretty land, she's a pretty face, and spinning wild in outer space. She's calling on you today, in a better time, in a better place, in a flash of light and blinding grace. She drives. She's a pretty face, and spinning wild in outer space. She's calling on you today, in a better time, in a better place.
And of course, you can gang up all these gains onto a macro if you want.
Flash of light and blinding grace. She drives. Spinning wild in outer space.
Short and sweet, the Virtual Mix Rack 3.0 is an incredible tool. It makes mixing every track fast. There's been one of these loaded in every vocal channel that I've recorded for the last 5 years. There are over 20 individual modules in the Virtual Mix Rack, and that's just part of the 80 plus plugins you get with Slate's All Access Pass. For a couple bucks more, you can get the complete access bundle with every plugin that SSL makes as well. I'm not crazy about subscriptions, but I make an exception for the complete all access bundle. It's the only audio subscription I keep. If you're interested, you can get a trial. Try these things out yourself. Don't forget, this is part of a large playlist I'm making of all of the Slate and SSL plugins. Scan the QR code above to try out complete access bundle.